Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Introduction to Emotion Coaching. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and waters throughout Australia on which we are sitting and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I'm Stacey and I'm the Executive Officer of Reframing Disability, and I'll be moderating the session tonight. For those who aren't familiar, Reframing Disability is a non-profit organisation in New South Wales. We're by and for families of young children with a delay or disability. Our aim is to change outdated perspectives of what disability means for our children's future, so families can start from the point of hope and possibility. We do this at Reframing Disability through running workshops, creating information and resources, and offering a space for families to come together and build their skills and knowledge so they can create the best life for their child now and into the future. So I'm going to hand over now to Kylie and Melo, who will be your presenters for tonight's session. I'm so lucky to call Melo and Kylie friends and colleagues, and to be able to learn from them every day. Kylie is a mum to two neurodiverse children. Her family lives the day-to-day journey of what a medical and disability diagnosis means. She's an experienced naturopath, doula, and peer facilitator of parenting and disability programs. Kylie also mentors and supports families with evidence-based, child-led, strengths-focused, mindfulness, and growth mindset approaches. And Melo is a dad to two. His daughter, Victoria, has an intellectual disability. Melo is very passionate about helping people to be the best that they can be, and is particularly interested in assisting fathers to become a better parent, better partner, and better person. Melo's a life coach and runs My Time Group for Dads through Plumtree and facilitates a number of parenting programs. Both Kylie and Melo are trained to facilitate emotion coaching programs, which they'll speak about later on in the session. And also they've got first-hand experience, so using emotion coaching with their children. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kylie and Melo.
Thank you, Stacey. Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to Emotion Coaching. I'm just going to share some with you all. So welcome to the Introduction to Emotion Coaching. So Melo and I are going to just share a little bit of information from the slides tonight, and then at the end we're going to have some Q&A if you're interested, and we'll probably share some stories as well from our families. So I guess that you're wanting to know, what is emotion coaching? What's its background? So it's a strategy that was developed by Dr. John Gottman. He's a researcher psychologist with his wife, Dr. Julie Gottman, at the Gottman Institute, and they've got collectively over 40 years of research, 4 decades, probably around 50 years actually now. And together they do a lot of relationship work. There's a lot of books that they have together, and John Gottman's written a few on his own as well. And obviously emotion coaching is one of those. So emotion coaching, it's a research-based parenting technique that helps children to really understand their emotions. It's something that can benefit everybody. It benefits our children, but it also benefits us, the parent. It benefits their teacher, it'll benefit their therapists, and of course the rest of the family and siblings included. It's about 95% understanding emotions and empathy, and about 5% problem solving. And there's a 5-step method to emotion coaching, which we will be discussing a little bit further on. So emotion coaching helps us understand our emotions. It helps us to regulate them by the positive relationships we have with others, so the way we interact with others, to help support and guide our children to explore their full range of their emotions. So this is something that we want them to be able to access, is all of their emotions, because we all have really big feelings, and we know our children have big feelings. We also want you to know that emotions are actually neurophysiological, which means that they're physical, they're felt in the body, in the subconscious, and our feelings are self-perceived, so they're thought in our mind. When parents emotion coach, they're actually providing the child with the skills that set them up for positive social and emotional development. Bill,
Kylie,
would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. Hi, everyone, and thanks for being online with us tonight. So this is an introduction, as Kylie and Stacey have mentioned. The other thing I wanted to make note of is that this is not a disability-specific methodology or approach. So this is something that the Gottman Institute created, and it was an extension on a lot of the work that they do in relationships for adults, and so it's been really used a lot by a number of professionals. So it may or may not apply to our children who have got additional needs, and so I just want to make that clear. But having said that, I just feel that parenting programs are going to help us, the parent. So I've got no doubt that if you do a emotion coaching program or any type of parenting program, you're going to get some benefit out of it. Yeah, I just wanted to add that. The other thing on that slide, getting our children to understand the range of emotions, I think that's really important, because if we really think about it, our kids, when they're young, they'd be lucky to understand 12 emotions. They may have a handful of emotions, and we want to be able to guide them into understanding what they are, so they can then better understand what they can do with them. And if they're, in fact, what they think they're feeling is actually accurate. I just wanted to add that into this bit.
Thanks, Melo. Do you want to share about what our emotional intelligence is? I'll share that slide.
So emotional intelligence, I suppose many of you may or may not have heard of emotional intelligence, and that was something that Dan Goldman made really popular, and it's something that he actually didn't invent it. It was created by somebody else, and then he applied it into the corporate world in terms of leadership. But it was actually initially created for creating a better daily life. And so the reason we're sharing emotional intelligence with you is because as a parent, we're going to need to tap into our own emotional intelligence to be able to support our children. And we'll go through that a bit later when we go through the steps. But what really needs to happen, I suppose the key here is developing a self-awareness of our own emotions, and knowing when they come in and whether or not they're appropriate, and how we respond to our own emotions is going to help us then be able to support our children. So in terms of emotional intelligence, as the slide suggests, it helps us communicate effectively. So there's social skills that an emotionally intelligent person will be able to display, and this concept of empathy, and that's a big component of emotion coaching. And an emotional intelligent person with their social skills, and that's why it's often identified in leaders, will have the ability to empathize with others, the ability to understand and look at things from their perspective. And then obviously that self-awareness is required to be able to self-regulate. Because if you know how you're feeling, then you can determine whether or not that is where it needs to be, if it's a proper representation of the situation or not, and how to change that. Which then feeds into the ability to overcome challenges, because you've got that flexibility in that awareness, and then the ability to self-regulate. So emotional intelligence is really something that we need to explore as a parent to be able to support our children with the emotion coaching. Kylie, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I was going to add that it's about us understanding, first of all, what our emotions are in comparison to our feelings as well. So, and why we're having our emotions? We're having our emotions, why emotions exist. So if they're a part of our subconscious and our physical body, we feel our emotions in our body, they're there for our safety and for our survival. So they exist for that reason. And they're there to help us connect and bond to others. They're also there to help us communicate. You know, when you think about body language, the way that we can walk into a room and we can tell the way somebody might be feeling emotionally, it's because the body language that they're giving off, or the tone of their voice, the way they communicate. And I guess emotions really move us to act. So they motivate us into action. And they create the feelings that we feel. And I think Mel and I were talking earlier about, you know, the things that we feel is through the lens that we're looking through. So it's not actually based on just the emotion itself. Our feelings are through the lens where we've painted ourselves. It's the life experience that we've had. You know, when we look at the world that we're in now with our children with disabilities and delays, that lived experience that we actually have now is shaping the way we feel and the way our emotions are making us feel. So it's being able to connect into that and why we have emotions, and then to help our child to understand why they're having those emotions.
Do you know, Kylie, one of the things for me that I found really interesting was when I realized that there's actually no positive or negative emotions. You know, the emotion is an emotion that we experience. What makes it positive or negative is the response or the reaction to that emotion. So things like anger are not necessarily bad unless they're not resourceful. So because we want our kids, we want people to be angry when they should be angry. But we don't want them to be angry, or certainly not then turn that anger into violence. So this is about and this is why the emotional intelligence is really important, because there's two ways that, you know, a child is we need to encourage and support. It's an outside in, so they're going to get it from us through our emotional intelligence and identifying where they're at. They're going to get that guidance and support from us, so then they will eventually self-regulate from the inside out. But in those early years, it's going to come from us. And so positive and negative, you know, the emotions are just emotions, and we need to be able to see whether or not. So, for example, if it's a 4 out of 10 situation, and our child is giving us a 8 out of 10 response, that's what we want to be able to change. Or if it's an 8 out of 10 situation and they're giving a 4 out of 10 response, we want to change that as well. So we want the response to be relative to the actual event. But yeah, just getting my head around there isn't positive or negative emotions is really interesting. And just before we move on to this slide, one of the things that they've identified now is that one of the significant markers around a child's future success isn't even IQ. It's actually their ability to, their level of emotional intelligence. So their ability to identify their emotions, their ability to self-regulate, their ability to have empathy for others, it plays a more significant, will have a more significant impact on their future outcomes. And we'll go, well, I think we're going to touch on that now as well. So.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you. Do you want to discuss the benefits of emotion coaching?
Yeah, look, and please feel free to jump in. But I think one of the biggest keys here is that first one about being more resilient and not being affected in a sense where sometimes they may catastrophize an event. And so for us to support them and walk or be there with them to be able to do that, to then get to the point where they have the ability to do it for themselves. And that's where the self-regulation comes in. is going to mean that they're going to, in those ups and downs of life, they're going to be able to identify them as not being permanent, as having a solution. And that's going to lead to fewer behavioural problems. You're going to see that there's more secure attachment. And that's really important. Attachment theory talks about the bonds that are created in those early years at home, how they're going to influence the relationship moving forward, and a child's then likelihood to turn to us for support when they're uncertain. And then I know this is really important for many parents, just being confident, for their children to be confident in social situations, in their social interactions within their peer groups, is really important, because that brings them a level of self-confidence. It increases their level of self-esteem. Another area, obviously, is that engagement that they have at school. Children that have been emotion coached, and as you pointed out, Kylie, this is off the back of an evidence-based approach. So there's 30 years of research that has supported all of this information. Children that have been guided and supported and emotion coached in these early years, developing and displaying and delivering better outcomes through their education results as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Melo. And I think the other thing is realizing that emotions are universal. So the emotions that we're feeling, we're all feeling those emotions. And as we were saying before, it's look at our emotions that we start to see how feelings can be different. We can interpret it differently. But when a child has the ability to understand what they're feeling in their body, so the physical emotion that they're having, they can actually express it, and they can actually say how they're feeling in a more accurate way. And as you said, they self-regulate, and we know in the classroom that's going to make a big difference. We know at home it makes a massive difference when they can do that. But also us as parents, if we can tune into our emotional expression, what's going on inside our body, and then we can notice what's happening to us, because our children will trigger us. They trigger, or their expression triggers our expression. And so if we can tune into ourselves quicker, we can actually say, Mummy's feeling like this, or Daddy's now feeling that, and we can let them see us actually emotionally coaching ourselves as well. But then we can help our child to co-regulate. So together we co-regulate them. And we're going to discuss a little bit about brain development now and why that's important. So I'll just share the next slide.
Awesome. Can I just say, while you're doing that, to the parents that are on at the moment, for some parents, that's probably the most challenging part of this, is facing up to our own responses to these emotions and the triggers that our children's behaviour will bring out in us.
Yeah.
I think we're going to touch on it later, but yeah, we are going to touch on it. I'm just thinking now.
Okay, we'll save that point for a moment. And I just thought
thank you.
We'll talk about the different parenting styles, because we'll probably touch on that point. Just to let you know that as parents, we all have different parenting styles. We have different beliefs and attitudes and reactions around our emotions. Like, what do we think of our emotions? So we've talked about how we express how we feel, the lens we're looking through, but also what's our attitude? What do we think about emotions? And that's where our parenting style comes from, and also the way we were parented, the way we were brought up by our own parents. So the main parenting styles, and often parents have a combination. We don't have just one parenting style. We have a combination of these styles. The main ones are dismissive, where our child will come to us and you'll kind of push them aside and say, you're okay, don't worry, get up, come on, let's get going, you'll be fine. And then there's disapproving, where we say, stop doing that, stop crying, why are you crying, come on, get over it. And then there's the permissive, which is like, it's okay, you can feel that feeling, but we've still got it going. Come on, let's keep doing what we need to do. And then there is the emotion coaching, where we do a bit of that, where we're doing the permissive, but then we're doing more actually helping our child to tune in, tune into what they're feeling. And it takes a moment, a little bit more, a few minutes to do, but it gives them it gives us an ability to be able to then have a moment to teach, to guide our child. And we'll talk about those 5 key steps in a moment as well. So when we're emotion coaching, we're actually helping our child to feel valued, to feel accepted, and to feel understood. And if you think of that as an adult, how important is it when someone understands where you're coming from? How important is it for you to feel that your emotions are acceptable, the way you're feeling is acceptable, and to validate you? Like, I know for myself, it's so important. It's probably the most important thing. And I have a positive reaction when I have a relationship with someone, and that's the outcome. But we also know that emotion coaching can't happen all the time. So what they've discovered, the researchers said to us, that when we're emotion coaching around 30 to 40% of the time, then our children are going to feel that way. And the other time, we're going to have a combination of this dismissive, disapproving, and permissive style. So that's what the evidence and the research is showing us. But let's have a look at the brain. Melo, I'll let you start the brain.
Can I also just touch on that? And I think...
Yeah, of course, sorry.
No, sorry. But that 30 or 40% really was something that helped me sort of process it in my head, because, and I know for many parents, we carry all this guilt that I'm not doing enough, I should be doing more. But then when you see a figure like 30%, you go, 30%, gee, I can do 40, I'll do 60. The research says if you do 30% more positive interactions with your children, you're going to have greater positive outcomes for them. And that's really encouraging. The other thing about those 4 styles is that if we're not emotion coaching at the moment, then we're probably sitting in one of those other 3, which is not ideal. And that's okay, because the emotion coaching is something that, and that's what these courses are about. It's about understanding that just through, and we're talking about slight change or a different approach in the way that we're dealing in a situation is going to create this shift and support them in ways that's going to help them into their future.
And the other thing too, Melo, just from a parent's point of view as well, is that we don't always have time to emotion coach. It can take a few moments to do it, and sometimes even longer, depending on the age of the child, the developmental age as well. But we don't have time. We're rushing out the door in a hurry to get somewhere. We might be a bit dismissive or a bit permissive, or, even slightly disapproving, depending where we're at, because we have to remember that we're emotionally responding and reacting to our child as well. So sometimes we don't have the time. So that's why we know evidence says that if we can do it 30 to 40% of the time, then our children are going to have those feelings, those positive emotions around feeling valued, accepted, and understood. So I guess we need to know a little bit about the brain development, though.
Yeah. I just wanted to say there's a couple of questions in the Q&A, and we will get to them later. And thank you. They're really great, important questions, and we will get back to them. Okay. Sorry, Kyle.
No, that's okay. So just looking at the brain development, because if we think about our children from birth and where is their brain at from tiny, tiny babies up until, when we're starting to have those little conversations with them as toddlers, and then as they start to develop, into those early school, preschool and schooling years, and thereon, where are their brains at? How developed are their brains? And we know that brains aren't actually fully developed until at least 25 years of age. It can be debatable even if it's a bit later than that. So, when they're very young, we're talking about 70 to 80% developed, and by school, 80 to 90% developed. But it's the emotional development that we're talking about. And that, as far as emotional development goes, our children have their L plates on. For a very, very long time, they've got their L plates on. their brain connections are actually growing through their everyday life experiences. So the more opportunities that they have to connect and to see us dealing with our emotions and how those important caring adults in their life are doing it, the more they're going to actually understand and see how they should be doing it as well. So it's really the caring adults in their life that have the most influence on that developing child brain. Would you add anything to that, Melo?
I'd love to. That figure of 25 years of age is an average that they've drawn on. In actual fact, look, it may not surprise any of us, and it shouldn't, but women, their brain develops far earlier than the male brain. So the female brain will generally develop into maturity in the early 20s to the mid 20s. For the men, it's generally in the late 20s, and they're seeing now that it's clicking over into the 30s. And the less interaction that our children are having in daily life, the more this is going to draw out, because it's the ability of the brain to be activated that's going to allow that understanding to develop. And that's just not happening at the moment. There's no research about that, but they've already seen that male development is delaying even further. And that's why it's so important that we support our children. We're the ones with the fully developed brain. And well, I'll go into that after. Are we playing Siegel's video now?
Yeah, it's a good, I'll share it now. So Dr. Dan Siegel, do you want to introduce who he is, Melo?
Yeah, so Dan Siegel's written a lot of books and around the brain development and supporting children. And here he uses a hand model, which is a great model to for us as parents to understand, or to even share with your children if they've got that ability to watch this with you and understand it. But it'll just simplify what happens, and I'll just expand on it a little more shortly. I'll get some.
I'll share it now.
Thanks.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child. And that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think for a short video that really explains it really well. So yeah, Dan Siegel, whole brain child, the power of showing up, no drama discipline. There's quite a bit of work. He's very, very well regarded, but what he's talking about there is really, really important. And just that's in reference to what I was saying earlier about that's our responsibility. Our children need us because their brain hasn't developed yet. The prospect of L plates, they probably in those early years, we haven't even given them their L plates yet. But if we think of the brain, all right, so if we think of the brain, and that's the amygdala, where the flight, fight, fright, and freeze is happening, which is what's controlling a lot of their behavior at the moment. And this is the frontal cortex. So that's the brain stem. This is the frontal cortex. The person's looking that way. So what needs to happen is we need to activate the brain to start activating the frontal cortex. That's what takes longer and doesn't develop until in their 20s. So the emotion coaching starts to activate that process. And when and sometimes you'll see it in your child where this concept of almost seeing them thinking is happening. And we need to not interrupt that because we know that the neurons that fire together will wire together. And that's why this brain development is something that we can support and we can encourage by asking them questions, by expanding the range of their understanding about what emotions are. And when they say, I'm angry, and you go, and you want to acknowledge you're angry, yeah, I can see that you're angry. And then you can after take it to, is it angry or do you think you might be frustrated? And then you get them to start thinking. And we'll go into that shortly. But yeah, that's a great video. And I think that's really important to understand. They're using their primitive brain, the brain that was, we needed all those years ago, centuries ago, to keep us alive. But now it's deleting, distorting, and generalizing things in ways that are not serving our children. So yeah, we're going to go into the 5 steps. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Melo. I think, as Melo said, it really is important that we understand what's happening in our own brain and what's happening in our child's brain so we can understand the development that's going on for them, because we have our own struggle at times with being able to calm our emotion. We need to regulate ourselves before we even sometimes approach our child. And so our child's going to need our help so much more and to be able to co-regulate. So as Dr. Dan Siegel says, just naming the emotion is enough sometimes to tame down those feelings. And so when we have a look at the 5 key steps, Gottman has put... Yep. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of lag.
Sorry, can I just say before you start this, there's one thing that I say in the trainings that I do. And if we think about it, we teach our children how to tie their laces. We teach our children how to get dressed, put on pants or a top, or we teach them how to ride a bike, how to hold a knife and spoon, how to feed them. Yeah, we teach them all these things. Look, I certainly was guilty of this. I didn't realize how much help that they're going to need in these areas. And the more that now I understand that their brain is so underdeveloped and they need us so much because of that. And that's why we need to have that level of emotional awareness in ourselves to be able to go into that situation, to support them in the way that they need to be supported, to help them reframe and refute the thoughts or the emotions, the reactions, more so to how they're feeling. That concept of, we know that we've got to teach them how to, use a knife and fork, but when you talk about who's teaching them about, going beyond sadness, anger, joy, there's more emotions than is just in a Pixar movie, Inside Out. There's a lot more. Which is a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I really think you should watch that.
It is. I think it's the first movie of its kind, all about emotions. I loved it when I saw it. It's a great movie. So only because we are wanting to get to the Q&A, I'm just going to push along to the 5 key steps. But as you can see, Melo and I could talk about emotion coaching for a very long time because there's so much to unpack. But we just want to give you a little taste. This is just a taster. So the 5 key steps to emotion coaching are to notice and become aware, to tune into the emotion that's underneath that behaviour that you're seeing. As Melo said, at first you might think it's anger, but actually it might be frustration or it might be sadness, and being able to just notice and become aware. And then to be able to connect to the child. So step 2, connect the child to recognise the emotion, and then to know that this is a time for intimacy and for possible teaching. To just recognise that you can now lean into this and teach. And step 3, to listen with empathy, to actually imagine what it's feeling like for your child and to accept that they're feeling this way and to validate the way they are feeling. And then step 4, to actually help our child to use a word to describe how they're feeling. And this is the name it to tame it that we were just seeing on that video. Sometimes when we're so caught up in an emotion and we've flipped our lid, even not being even able to find a word, our little children, our developmentally delayed children, they're struggling to even think of what they're feeling. So to be able to help them name it to tame it. And then if there's an opportunity, this doesn't always happen step 5. Often we don't even need step 5, or we just don't have the time, or we just haven't got that opportunity. But when we do, to help our child to problem solve, see if they can problem solve. The older children, definitely give them an opportunity to problem solve and to set some limits, because all feelings are definitely acceptable, but not all of their behaviours are. Melo, would you add anything to that?
If I've got time. That first point, noticing their emotion, I think the other thing that we need to be aware of in that stage is really noticing them early. So if we notice that emotion early in our children, we might be able to get involved before it gets even to that behavioural problem. So we need to have this sensory acuity about us that and no one knows our kids like we do, let's face it. So we know that if they've gone quiet or if their body's rigid, or we know the signs. So if we're seeing those signs, we need to respond to them. That connection, it's really about being with and just being really present, validating them. Gives them this sense that I've got your back. I'm here with you. I know you're not feeling you're not feeling well. So, and what we need to understand about this is, acknowledging something is not accepting something. It doesn't mean that, but you need to acknowledge it. You need to validate that's their feeling, because otherwise we're dismissing it, and we don't want that, because then we're just confusing the child. And we're getting our child to dismiss their feelings or their reactions or their responses. We need to acknowledge it, and then later we can look at shifting it. Having said all this, though, I also just say, it just we're 40 minutes. To explain, and it is an introduction, but what takes 3 weeks to share with parents, and then that takes a long time. Like, we're not talking about, if we think about it, we don't go from here. Oh, you can't even see that. Let me just. Things don't work like that. We don't, start here and then it ends up like that. There's resistance, and we have to understand that that's going to happen. And there's going to be days where 30% of the time. So there's days that we're going to not do it well, and that's okay. And there's going to be days that our children are not going to like it, and that's okay. But the thing is that try and identify it early, acknowledge it, and be present, be with them. We said at the start that this is not a disability-specific model program, and it's not. But there's going to be things that we're going to learn as parents. Therapy is for our children. Parenting courses are for us. Now, I thought Victoria's got an intellectual disability. I didn't think that this was going to apply for her. And it's only been about, I don't know, a month ago that I thought, I'm just going to, and it was crazy because I'm thinking, why am I not applying it with my daughter? Because I started this training trying to help my son. And I didn't think it was going to apply to my daughter, but she's getting it too. And then I sort of felt guilty that I didn't do it earlier, but throw that out the window. Being with is really powerful. Now, like I say, I don't know if it's going to necessarily work for your children, but it's certainly worth.
Can I say, Melo? I know that I know that, and my son too has an intellectual disability. He's autistic with an intellectual disability, and I know that we used to struggle a lot before we applied some of the strategies of emotion coaching. And I know that if I, as you said, it's getting in early, and if I can start to see him escalating, the behaviours are there's a behaviour coming, and you can see when your child's escalating, and we don't always have time to jump in. But I know that when I have been able to jump in and to help him to name the emotion, like to be aware, say to him, it looks like you're getting upset. It looks like, the other day, I couldn't believe it, he actually said the word frustrated. It shocked me. So obviously, using that word, I can see it, look at you, you're now getting agitated. I can see you're upset because you're pulling the angry face. And, we talk like that. And as you do this with younger children seem to really accept you speaking like that. I wouldn't say to you to say that to an older child, a tween, preteen, teen child. I'm going to like it if you call them out on their physical emotions that they're showing. But doing it to our younger children, so my son's 7, developmentally a lot younger, and being able to just tell him what I'm seeing in him. He's now actually starting to show me that he is able to be aware of his emotions himself, and he'll say, Mummy, and he said the other day, he said, Mummy, I'm frustrated. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. This little boy has just been able to do that. So that's the modelling. We are modelling it to our child. We are showing them how it's done. And as we said, we know that you're not going to be able to do it 100% of the time. No parent can. We're going to be doing a combination. I certainly have been dismissive. I've certainly been disapproving. But, it's just being a parent. And also, when I'm tired, exhausted, triggered, I just become my own parent. The way I was parented just comes out in me. So it's just normal. It's going to, and same with my partner. It comes out in him too. So there are going to be times where our kids trigger us. The developmental age of our child might trigger us to a time back when we were that age. I know lately my daughter's becoming more of a tween, and as she's getting older, it's triggering me at that age that I was as well. So it's being able to relate back to our children and to realize, if we can do this 30 to 40% of the time, we're winning. They're going to be felt understood by us. They're going to feel validated. We are accepting these big feelings they're having and these emotions they're having, but we need to accept them in us as well, I think. I can see we have a lot of Q&A and we need to get on with it. Sorry, Melo. I'll just quickly share the last slide, which is really now that, oops, sorry, my slide's a bit stuck. So where to learn more about this. And so this is really me introducing you to the fact that Melo is going to be running is for free, is 123 Magic and Emotion Coaching.
Well, there's a cost for the book.
Yeah, so it's free through Plumtree Children's Services. You can get on their website in the Eventbrite link. It's in October. He's running one, it's a mixed group, and then he's running one for dads. Is that right, Melo?
Yes, that's right.
And it's $20 just for the workbook, but otherwise the program is free. So if you're thinking about it and thinking, when can I start? There's one in October. And then just quickly to let you know that Resourcing Parents New South Wales have a directory, and there's a lot of programs on there to check out, and a lot of them are emotion coaching based programs, and some you'll find some are free and others might be a small fee like the one Melo's doing. And then if you're really interested in going to the source, the Australian emotion coaching course is recognised, is called Tuning Into Kids, and that's a $99 subscription for the year, and you can go in and out and do the course within the year. Or you can go straight to the Gottman Institute, which is Emotion Coaching, the Heart of Parenting, and that's $59 US dollars. So it's not Aussie dollars, it's $59 US dollars.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah.
And just to encourage you to get in contact with us at Reframing Disability as well. So there's all of our connections to get in contact with us if you're not already, if you're watching live, and you are. So I'm just going to stop sharing and go to the Q&A. And then anything Melo or I would like to share. So, Stacey, do you want to? Thanks, Stacey.
Oh, well, thank you, guys. I could just keep listening to you all night. That was really informative. Thank you. There was a lot to share. We've actually got quite a number of questions that have come through through the Q&A, but also on Facebook. We will try and get through all of them, but if not, I've just replied to a few people to say that we will get responses, and we'll make sure that they go live when we post this on YouTube. So, all right. So one of the questions that came through on Facebook is, how can we support our kids to go through big emotions when we ourselves are feeling angry or anxious? Some of these you have touched on during, so if you want to build upon it.
Do you want to answer, Melo?
Yeah, look, thank you. And that's a fantastic question, because it's going to happen. There's going to be times that it's, as we've mentioned, it's going to trigger things in us. Certainly the program's Circle of Security, which is about attachment theory, looks at getting us to assess the way that we were parented. So often when we reflect on the way that we were parented, we might realize that there were certain parts of things that were done well in our home and other parts of things that were not done so well, and they generally then roll over into the way that we do things. They talk about in Circle of Security, they talk about the subject of a timeout, but the timeout in Circle of Security is for the parent. So what happens for me if I find that I'm getting a bit upset or I'm not being as reasonable as I should be, me just walking into the kitchen, get a glass of water and coming back has shifted my state. Because this is what we're talking about, shifting our children's states. If we're upset, we have to shift our state. And it's hard sometimes in that whirlpool of emotion for us to be able to do that to ourselves. The other thing is, if you're in a relationship, so if you're not a single parent, both of you doing the program and supporting one another would be wonderful. I know in my situation, my wife did it first, and then she said, "This is." She did a parenting program. She said, "This is fantastic. You need to do it." And so we now use a code word. Our code word's not even a word. We use COS, because the first training we did was Circle of Security. because we didn't want to use the word love and then have our child associate a word like love with when someone was like losing their but so if you're getting angry a lot, the reality is that we need to understand why that's happening, and be able to deal with that better. The fact that...
Sorry, can I just add something else? This might cover it for other people as well. Is like Melo said, we need to check in with ourselves why. But have you heard of that hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Sometimes just checking in with yourself and going, hang on a minute, it's called halt, stop and halt. Angry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And if you're tired as a parent, right? Which parent isn't tired? You're going to be susceptible to be triggered easier. So all of your programming from your parents raising you is going to come up, like Melo said, and you're going to be triggered easier. So it's first checking in with yourself, and sometimes it's just like having a pause, like Melo said, just going getting a glass of water, walk away for a moment. If the kids are safe, just walk away, count backwards from 10, grab some oxygen, and then go, is this an emotion coaching moment or not? And as Melo said, if you've got another parent to support you with, or a friend who might do the course with you as well, then you have it. It's not always going to be an emotion coaching moment.
No.
Sometimes it's going to be, we just have to get on with it, or just because we are parents, so just because comes out sometimes too.
And the other thing that what you've just shared, Kylie, is just reminding me about this prospect of self-care. And for us, more than anyone, the additional layers of complexity and challenges that we're faced with as parents of children with a disability, a delay, a challenge, means more than ever, self-care must be made a priority. There must be time made for us. We're filling emotional cups. Who's filling ours? We need to be able to take care of ourselves. To give our best to our children, we have to be at our best. So, and I know that it's easier to say than to do, because, for some of us, the prospect of sleeping isn't that easy, because there's other factors if our children are not sleeping. So I'm fully aware of that, but we need to find a way that we're not going through the day totally drained. I haven't got the answers for that. And to be honest with you, I haven't got a lot of the answers. For those of you that are asking questions about you're engaging with psychologists or therapists, they're experts in those areas. So they're the best people that are going to be able to support your children. But what I do know is that the things that you would learn from an emotion coaching program are going to help. They're going to give you some things that you can turn to in terms of the approach that you take. Things like language are so powerful, and it's not until you realize what our words may be doing to our children, to our partners, or even to our own self-talk, what it's doing to us. Self-care is healthcare, as we say. And Kylie says it's childcare. Sorry, Kylie.
Melo, I think there might be a couple more questions before we finish.
I'm a bit of a talker. Sorry, everyone.
Wonderful. I wanted to just really quickly add to that one before I ask the next question. Zones of Regulation is an incredible program for helping teach your kids their emotions. But as a family, doing that yourself, my son has done it. We've done it for many years, and it took a while for him to understand the concepts, but I also did it as a parent, and it really helped me to recognize my emotions and feelings and know how to regulate. So I think that's a great program, and there's many other ones out there, but taking all of that on board and doing it with your kids as well. All right. So another person has asked, are the 5 steps something that are done once the fight, flight, freeze, meltdown has passed? My son will often be screaming at me. He doesn't know what he's feeling while I'm holding space.
Yeah. And so the answer to that is possibly, first of all, you're already doing the first step, you're noticing. You're already doing that. You're also probably doing the second and third step without realizing it. You know, you're starting to empathize with your child. You're starting to notice your child's body language. So you're probably already doing some of those steps. It's not like the steps aren't like, oh, okay, I'm ticking off a checklist. They become sort of automated, you know, because once you start emotion coaching, you start becoming more, you do it more, and your confidence builds after you do it. So I have to say, the more emotion coaching I do, sometimes I only get the first 3 steps in, and sometimes I get to name it for my child. So I wouldn't try naming it for my child while they're having a violent meltdown.
Yeah.
I would just make them safe. It's first aid stuff then. It's just, I'm aware what's happening. I haven't been able to get in before it escalated. Okay. And then just make your child safe.
Yeah.
Wait till they calm down a bit. You might even find if you go to talk sometimes to your child when they're in that moment, even your talking can set them back off again. So that's not the right time to talk. You might try a different strategy then.
Yeah.
You might put on some aromatherapy or some relaxing music, or dim the lights down, or just change, offer them a glass of water, but not a bottle of water, but nothing else. But as soon as you see that they're coming back down, their frontal cortex is slowly coming back down, that's when you might say, I can see you're very upset. I can see that you're having a very hard time right now. You know, you look very, very sad or very angry or whatever it might be. Sometimes children cry after they've had a big meltdown. They're exhausted, and they cry because sometimes they don't want to be having the meltdown. I know older children that carry the guilt of that. You know, they carry the guilt. So we want to be able to help them then understand those emotions that are underneath and the feelings that it can then create for them. And that's when we have that moment to do it. You know, if we see our child about to hurt, I'm reading in some of the comments, if our child's hurting another child, their sibling or another child, that's a behaviour that we put a limit on. You know, we talk about in step 5, solutions and limits. It's okay to have those big feelings and emotions, but it's not okay to do that. That is never okay. So let's now find, once they've calmed down, let's find other solutions. What else could you do? Bring it back to your child. When you're feeling that angry, when you're that upset, what else could you do? You know, my daughter suggested I could rip up paper and tissues. And I said to her, wow, that sounds like when you're really angry, that would work. That'd feel good to rip up paper and tissues. Yeah. And so I would find her sometimes, I'd say something and then she'd be ripping a tissue up, and I'd go, oh, okay, I know how she's feeling right now. She's ripping up a tissue. So, you know, it's bringing it back to our child and go, okay, you can recognize that you're not okay right now. And how can you go and find, and that's co-regulation turning into self-regulation for our child. And it takes time for them to get to that stage. It doesn't just happen overnight. And it takes time for us to be able to do it. To find a way. I'm certainly not good at self-regulation when I haven't slept more than a few hours at night. I had a moment this morning where I actually said to my children, you know, come back and connect to your child when you've had big feelings. I had big feelings this morning, and I had a moment where I wasn't at my best because I was exhausted. And then I said to my kids, I'm really sorry, Mummy wasn't doing very well then. And we talked about it, and we had a big family hug, and then I got covered in kisses. So it was just one of those moments, and that's human. That's being human. But when we're emotion coaching, we can show our kids, hey, look, happens to mum or dad too. We have those moments. And it's obviously not okay for me to have a behaviour that's going to be unsafe. I would never want that to happen. So we need to check in with ourselves really quickly and say, this is where I need to regulate really fast. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it might be you walking away as a parent, but you have to make sure your child's safe too. So it might be taking your child away while they're being violent, if you can, or taking the other children away from your child. Saying to the children, go watch a movie while we do over here. Go on the iPad or play a game or whatever.
Can I ask, quite a few of the questions coming through are asking for some practical examples. You know, there's a range of ages and practical experiences that people are listing. The emotion coaching programs that you've suggested, do they go into those practical examples?
Yes, they do. They share a lot of examples. They have video content as well, so they show video examples. I mean, you could get onto the Tuning In for Kids or the Gottman Institute Emotion Coaching, and they would show you, they've got example videos of what's in their programs anyway, but you would see an example of a parent being disapproving or dismissive or permissive, and show you what the parent is doing in that situation with the child's behaviour. And then the next videos, I'll show you the child's behaviour is the same, but they'll show the parent now emotion coaching it. And they give many, many video examples so that you can then see all of this modelling. And there's also a book that you've talked about, Stacey and Sophie, How to Speak to Your Children So They Will Listen and Listen. There you go.
It is my absolute favourite book. I talk to everybody I know about it. And this one that I just bought. Siblings, if anyone has multiple children.
And we also have the Explosive Child there. Yeah. So there are some amazing books out there that are actually worth your time. And if you don't read books, that's fine, because there's Audible. You can listen to books, and sometimes some of the podcasts you could just go and look up podcasts. They actually have the authors on, and they'll talk, and TED Talks on this as well. So yeah, but
we'll
the
put
answer
it
to that is
together.
yes.
Yeah. Can I just touch on that? The consequences to behaviour is really a critical component to that fifth step. And there has to be consequences that are followed through. So obviously that's going to happen when everyone's calm, having those conversations. But I think that's going to be one of, and this is the difficult part, for different ages, you're going to be able to have a different capacity for them to have those conversations. Sorry if I've sort of jumped into a book conversation, but I know we're short on time. So the consequences are critical. And they can't be bold. You're never going to watch TV again. And then obviously, the next day they're watching TV. Or even if it's, in 2 days, they'll know that, they'll identify those as hollow threats. The other thing is, if our children are young and don't understand that, we have to find a way that they're going to be able to respond. And this is where the difficulty in having our children who have got these challenges that, where I thought Victoria wasn't going to understand. I just wanted to add that. I'm going to add this book to your list too. The Explosive Child is very, very
a few people have asked about this, and what I really love is it gives the examples that Kylie spoke about. So it will show what maybe a dismissive parent will say, and then what an emotion coaching parent will say. And it's really practical.
Gives it in little cartoon, like little comic cartoons,
yes,
doesn't it? Yeah. So
it does.
Visual.
My son's psychologist recommended it, and just after our first, we had maybe 2 or 3 conversations using the techniques, and I could just see a change. This is my oldest son who doesn't have a disability, but just straight away there was a change in the way he approached me and our connection. It was, I was blown away. And since then, I've tried to use it at least 30 to 40% of the time.
That's so important, though. That is so important. I was doing all the time.
I was so glad when you told me that, Kylie, because I was like, oh my goodness, it's really hard to do this all the time.
Can I also add another thing? And Siegel touched on it. Repair is really vital. So if you find that you've lost it with your children, that's something that you need to make sure you fix. You can't allow your child to go to bed attaching whatever meaning that they attach to that moment, thinking that that's their new truth. We don't know. Nothing has meaning but the meaning we give it. And if something's happened, that we were part of that event and situation which wasn't ideal, make sure that there's some repair. And if you do repair, that's going to go a long way to, again, even creating that attachment with your child, which is really, really vital.
I completely agree, Melo. And I also think it's really important to just tell story to your child. So, it's okay for your children to see your vulnerability. It's okay for you to apologise to your children. It's all perfectly healthy to do.
Oh, yeah.
And to tell stories. So I
They
know
should see that,
sometimes.
Kylie.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
I think.
Yeah, you're being generous to everyone. No, they should see us fail. They should see us do something wrong, and for us to show them that it's okay. It's part of life.
It's a part of life, exactly.
And for us to, they're going to learn more from what they see us do than from what we say. And on that point, be careful that you don't. If you're trying to explain something for longer than 10 minutes, you've been talking too long. Our kids are kids, no matter how mature we might think they may be for their age.
And that's why I was saying about the story. Like, I find sometimes an event will happen in the day, and we've had a moment where maybe even mum hasn't had a chance to emotion coach it as well as she liked, and then it'll be coming into like bath time, bedtime, and I'll tell a little story about when I was young, and something like that happened to me, or I'll say that happened to Daddy when he was your age, or I might tell about. I often tell stories about my younger brother because he would get up to lots of mischief, and I would tell stories. Oh, when he used to do that, and my kids love the story. And they go, and what happened? And did you get into really big trouble? And I'll go, oh yeah. And this is what, and often we'll go to, oh, when I was young, that, these things happened. But it was a way of telling it in a fun way of telling the story. And I get to tell the whole story. And it's a great time way of then repairing any damage that's happened throughout the day. But also acknowledging, like, I feel like this. Did you feel like that today when that happened to you? When those people weren't, letting you play and join in? Did you feel like that? Because I felt really, and you can go to all different types of scenarios, and it can be the bedtime story. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be you telling those stories, and they're stories healing. When we tell story, we start to heal, and it's a great way for us to heal too.
Can I just, I love that, Kylie. Do you know, the more I help my children to grow, I'm finding that they're helping me to heal as a person. And, I am their dad, I am their teacher, they're, someone who's going to guide them, mentor them, and support them. But I'm a student as well. Every day I'm a student, and it's a beautiful thing that I'm experiencing, spending time with them. Being with them is just, just being with them is beautiful.
Right. I'm going to just ask one more question. I'm mindful of time, and then I'm going to ask you both if I can just catch you in the next few days to just get your thoughts on some of the other questions. So we'll make sure that we publish those to make sure that everyone's questions have been answered. Someone on Facebook asked, is it being dismissive to distract during a meltdown? My daughter has meltdowns, and the only thing that calms her is singing. She's 2 and has a brain disability.
Can
I answer that a little bit first? I was just going to say the singing bit is not actually just a distraction. It's a strategy because it's melodic and it's predictable, and the brain actually is calmed and regulated by the singing. Alison Davies is a neurological brain specialist, and she has a course that she talks all about this called Brains Equals Behaviours, and I love it. It's a brilliant course, and I love Alison. And I think using that, it's not just a distraction, it's a strategy. It's if it works. So it's not exactly being dismissive, but you might be able to, now that you've got some emotion coaching awareness, be able to add in some of that. And as we were saying, it's, the 30-40% of the time. So it's using a combination of what works, but you have a new strategy by using the singing. I don't know, Melo, if you're going to say something similar.
Yeah, look, my daughter's got an intellectual disability, and she loves singing as well. And I use that strategy as well. But earlier I talked about reframing and refuting what our child is experiencing. If it's like I said earlier, if it's a 4 out of 10 event and they're responding as a 7 or 8 out of 10, the one word that I didn't include in that is interrupt. It's okay. We want to interrupt. They're somewhere where we don't want them to be. That it's not serving them. So interrupting that is not being dismissive. So I think that's going. Yeah, if someone's hurt themselves and a dad says, "Get up," you're okay, or don't cry. That's being dismissive. But shifting their state, which is what we want, shifting their state is what you want to achieve. And if you can do it as and something like singing, I think that's got like I use it, and Victoria loves it.
That's really great to know. Thank you. All right, I'm mindful of time. Like you're both saying earlier, I could talk about this all night. I could listen to you all night. So thank you everybody for joining tonight's session. We hope you found it valuable. There were a list of programs and resources suggested. We will put together a list of podcasts and videos and programs and different people to follow and explore a bit further. And we'll email that to you in the next few days. And we'll also endeavour to answer all of the questions. Thank you, Kylie and Melo.
A pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and all of your personal experiences. I'm just going to ask again, I did share a survey link before into the chat function. I'll share it again now. You can just click on it if you are able to just take a quick moment to fill that in. That would be really valuable. It helps us to get your feedback into our programs and what's working and what's not working well, and also suggestions. Like, we'd love to know, do you want more of this? And what else can we do to support you and your family?
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I hope you found I hope you found the information helpful. And all the very best. Hopefully we'll see you in the Zoom room another time.
Yeah. And thank you to everybody on Facebook that's been tuning in. There's lots of messages saying thank you so much.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.